Hey, I'm so excited, Erik Qualman, that I get to have this conversation with you. It was really fun that, we orbit around each other in Austin and have for many years, run into each other at the airport every once in a while, but we haven't had time for lunch in quite some time. And just last week, we got to be the same client event in Philadelphia. And it would be really great to see you in action and to see how resonant your message is about focus and around navigating, the change in this very tender moment in time. But now I'm excited that we get to have you here helping us launch this podcast. I don't know about you, but after I give a talk, often parents come up or people come up to me in the role of parent and talk to
Hmm.
me about what's going on for their kids as much as what's going on in their offices or in their lives. And so this is an opportunity for us to be able to direct the conversation specifically to that side of where people are in their worlds right now. So thank you.
No, thank you. No, I love it. And you're right. It's funny because I was speaking in San Antonio, and then I was with the speaking bureau that brought me in, and they were there when people came and asked me questions, and a lot of them were dad parenting questions, and so they were taken aback because I just talked about future proofing you, artificial intelligence, and so he was just taken aback. Wow, like a lot of those questions were more personal.
Right? Because I
Yeah.
think that, when I, give my talks, I always talk about there's sort of a nested system, right? It's us as a
Mm,
professional, which sits inside another bigger circle,
yeah.
which is us as humans, which sits inside a bigger circle, which is us as members of society. And we think that people are only going to constrain their understanding of their questions to the first circle. And the reality is they're thinking across all those things. And the boundaries
Mm,
between these things are becoming much more porous, right? When you and I had breakfast together, we spent a lot of time talking
yeah.
about parenting in this modern era right now, and some of their questions and challenges. And I think it's also fascinating that here you are, speaking in 55 countries around the world, really as a very lauded insight and motivational speaker around these times, but you're also a dad,
Mm,
right? And a
yeah.
spouse, but you've got two young girls that are one's in middle school and one's in high school. And so you're living it at the same time that we're talking it. I'm a little on the outside edge of having my kids
Yep.
be in the house and in school. So this is a very poignant conversation when we start to imagine that the world is changing fast, right? And you have a great video that you show in your talks that give a bunch of stats. But is there one compelling stat that you can kind of like sums up, what we don't fully appreciate about how much is happening in this world right now?
Yeah, I think that we're having more conversations with bots and with our spouse. And so you can see that trickle down to your kids
Oh,
and
wow.
grandkids. And so,
Okay, so that's an
yeah,
actual stat that we're having more conversations with the bots than with our spouses.
correct. Yeah, we're having more conversations with bots than with our spouse. And I'm
Okay.
sure if we double clicked on that, that might also hold true with your kids. And the stat that always hits me hard with your kids is that 80% of the time you're spending with them is before they're 18. And so I'm
Wow.
very cognizant to make sure I'm taking advantage of all these minutes that I can. And part of that's communication. So in a hyper connected world, it's very easy for us to be lonely. And that's true for our kids as well. So as parents, we need to be aware of what our behavior is, showcasing to them. So if we're at a stoplight, are we checking our phone? Oh, we're stopped. I can check my phone. Oh, I just caused the three cars behind me to miss the left turn because I was checking my phone. I didn't know it turned green. So it's really what behaviors are we showcasing to our children?
So you're very conscious of that all the time as you run around and are spending your time with them. When you often say it's interesting, you say it's about not about doing more, but doing what matters. So how does that translate to when you're a parent? So this is what you're saying here is when you're at a traffic
Yeah.
light, right? That you're really conscious
Yeah.
with them. What are the other moments where you really think about it, like you're conscious of it?
Yeah. I mean, it's like the not so simple art of doing less, comma, better. So I'm conscious of it at the table. Am I making sure the technology's off? But really, I'd rather have an hour where I'm fully present with my kids than 3 hours where I'm in and out because you're not really present. And so it's important for you to know, hey, this window is for my kids right now. This is that window, nothing else. And so that's the key is to make sure you're not quote unquote like multitasking with your kids' time.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing I'm most cognizant of. And it's hard to do. I'm not perfect at it. So I catch myself often and have to pause and go, okay, it's time to be present.
So you have built so much of your career around focus and around this importance of focus. Every time I walk through the airport in
Mm.
Austin, your book is right there, my friend, with your big bright green glasses, welcoming me and making me think more about how I need to be more focused. So you're doing this in an age of hyper distraction,
Yeah.
right? I mean, to your point, I get pings on my phone online. Do you get alerts on your phone, or have you the kind of guy who's turned them all off?
I have them off to a fault sometimes. So I just have it muted. And so it's off to a fault. But the other day, it's crazy. My daughter called me when I was on stage. It might have been when I was in Philadelphia. I can't remember. But that rarely happens. And my wife her mom was having surgery. So she was out of town. So the kids actually had to get up. I had a flight at 4. So the kids had to get up on their own and get themselves to school, which they're first time they've had to do that when neither of us are there because neither of them drives, right? They're too young to drive. And so I get this call on stage, and it did alert me on my watch because I think I have just alerts for my kids if they called me in that moment.
Right.
And that had never happened in 15 years. My oldest is 15. And so fortunately, I'm a video storyteller. So when I was playing one of the videos, I quickly texted my daughter and she replied to me. So I actually called her when I was on stage and muted my microphone. And she said everything's okay. She had it was something that wasn't important, but my heart sank. But I was like, oh my gosh, I'm calling my daughter while I'm giving a keynote. But fortunately, I fortunately turned the mic off and I was playing a 90-second video, so I quickly called her.
That
Is
is
everything
so
okay?
funny. I'm
Yes.
trying to
Okay.
imagine you
See
on
ya.
stage doing that.
Yeah. It was like my phone was in my backpack down. I had to call for my watch. That's why I got alerted because I only have alerts for those two for
I
that
think the
day.
irony of a man who's talking about focus,
Yeah.
giving a
Yeah.
talk during the middle, I mean, giving a call from his watch in the middle of a keynote does make me
Yeah,
laugh
because I
in
had
a
just
way.
for those 2, those are the only 2 that I had. If a call came in for either of them, and I told them that, and I forgot
Right.
what I gotta ask her. I forgot what it was. I mean, it wasn't important. I was
Right, 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 right. But
like
it
I,
is funny, right, that
yeah,
they have the instant access. Well, I think that
yeah,
part of the reason I keep alerts on my phone, honestly, is because my daughter, who's 21, 22,
yeah,
has them on her phone. And so
yeah,
I feel like if there is some really, dark headline that is coming across, and there are many of them right now, I
yeah,
feel like she's seeing them too, and I want to have a chance to connect with her around it, or anticipate that
yeah,
I'll get a call around it, or if nothing else, just understand all the stuff that's coming in for her, because she hasn't turned them off. And so I think
yeah,
that's an interesting thing around focus too, is choices that we're making to be connected versus be completely, whatever the word is, turned off from that stuff,
yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so again, in this world of like encouraging and constant distractions, I'm assuming your business is doing really well, or do you find people pushing against it and saying there's just no way?
Yeah. No, no, it's great. I mean, for me, I'm the type of guy that you would run into it. I would have missed without my wife and my cool daughters. I wouldn't have known the Coldplay, that whole meme till
Right.
like day 5. And so sometimes I'm more on the extreme, but I know my thought is after doing the focus project, because I did that for 2 years and wrote the book, if it's important enough, it'll find me.
All
So
right.
that's just my philosophy. It's if important enough, it'll find me.
Fair enough. All right. So when we start talking then again about the kinds of challenges that are going to be coming at families, right, with all of the media that sits inside the house, and as they're trying to figure out how to decide whether or not their kids should have phones or not have phones, be on computers, not on, be on computers, I guess sort of your thinking about how you've approached it as a parent and or guidance that you give other people as to, are there hard set rules, are there, sort of how would one
Mhm.
apply your research and thinking to my daily home with teens?
Yeah, daily with teens or with your kids. So just so you know, if it was up for a vote, I'm upset with myself that I want to drive this. I want to be more of a movement. There should be an age gap, a limit, like a gate, 16, I think, for social media, just to give these kids a fighting chance. And so, if you're asking me, I would love that. I think it's one thing that most people, almost every parent, would raise their hand and say, yes, please. So, until that day comes, you've got to figure out what works best for you and your kids. For us, we've got certain rules that the phone charges centrally downstairs. Their rooms are upstairs. So the phones are not up there after 9 o'clock. They're being charged. And that applies too when they have sleepovers. And so my wife and I do rock, paper, scissors for who's going to be the uncool parent that has to go in to these super popular girls and tell them, I need your phone. And it's kind of a personal thing. They're handing over their phone. There's a lot of stuff I like, look, I'm not going to look at it. I'm going to charge it. I'm just taking them to charge. And then they have a great time, right? They have to interact, engage without those devices. And so that's just a known rule that we have, and it's been very helpful. The other thing is we tried to, like we talked about earlier, show versus tell. It's
Yeah.
the old adage that Kids might not listen to what you say, but they certainly watch what you do.
Right.
And so, are you texting when you're driving? If you have a 10-year-old, they're watching that. And so, when they come 15 and have their permit, they think that's normal behavior.
Right.
And so, it depends. You've got to model the behavior you want to see. And that's not always easy to do. And so, and no one's perfect at it. So, that's why in the book, The Focus Project, it's all about progress versus perfection.
Right.
It's really thinking about those ups and downs like a roller coaster day to day. But over time, that line continues to go up, that you are getting better at focus and getting better at showing your children how to focus.
So when you think about the role that AI is going to continuously play, right now we're talking about let me just back up on the social media
Yep.
thing, just my perspective on it. And I'm sure if someone listens to 10 of these
Yep.
episodes, you're going to hear me say this every single time. But for me, it's not about the technology, right? It's the way that it's being commercialized and
Yep.
distributed. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
this idea of wanting to have a technology that connects us to one another and lets us share things with one another is a very human extension
Yeah.
of the way that we want to be, in whatever, in cahoots with one another. But when it has been weaponized to be an aggressive tool to bring out the worst in us, right? As
Yeah.
an advertising delivery mechanism. So for me, I hold advertisers responsible. I hold investors responsible. I hold the data scientists that are paid, gazillions of dollars to be able to
Mm-hmm.
make this thing super, super addictive and sticky responsible. My children are older than yours. And so mine are actually grateful that they got introduced to social media before it had that kind of grip on them,
Yeah.
right? It was not considered as aggressive as it is now. It's sort of just an early days thing where people were trying to figure out like what an Instagram was, and they're really relieved that they got to
Mm-hmm.
experiment with it. So the age thing is one thing, but the age thing is because we're gating it against a predatory industry, as opposed to like giving potato chips to your kids when they're 16 or whatever. Like we're trying to teach them in some ways digital hygiene around that, trying to help them understand that this is being used to to exploit them and to stalk them in ways that I wish that they didn't have to fear tech companies so much. That to me is one piece of it. We start to imagine
Yeah.
the gating and so you're right. I think parents are figuring out, okay, in that kind of predatory environment, what are ways that I can try and push against it? And one of which is potentially an age limit. One is having those kinds of rules, hoping that your kids' parents also want to do that. The friends' parents are kind of aligned. We're seeing, in some households around the country now, return to the analog phone. Have you seen the landline phone? Right?
Yeah.
Because kids are also realizing, and this is where I think that's really interesting. Kids partly want to be able to still have access to be able to talk to their friends, but they're also realizing they don't want to be surveilled and they don't want to be recorded. And you talk a lot about the digital footprint and the
Mm-hmm.
reputation, right, that students have. And so the idea that they can say anything they want on a landline phone and not worry that it's somehow going to end up all over somewhere else. So I also
Yep.
think it's really interesting to see when things become even more predatory or the way in which it's used becomes more aggressive, we're figuring out ways to balance it back.
No, you're right. And to double click on that a little bit, exactly. I mean, the tool itself isn't bad. It's how it's deployed and somewhat how it's used. And also, as you mentioned, the bad actors, for lack of a better term. But you think about like if an age gate, it's just like realizing, hey, you should be 16 before you drive a car. Oh, it would be a good idea if we put these seatbelts in a car. Oh, when you ski, maybe it'd be good to have a helmet. Oh, when you ride a bike, it'd be good to have a helmet. Oh, there's lead in the water. Let's get lead out of the water. And so it's nothing necessarily new in terms of you learn and then you adjust. And so, like my book, the first book, Socialnomics, was you need to get into the social tools because it's fantastic. This could change the way we communicate and do business, politics. And then my last book, The Focus Project, is an anti-venom to that because people got too far into the phones. They got too far in because I said, get into this stuff. And they got too far in. It's like, no, the answer, like a lot of things in life, it's in the middle.
Right.
So these tools are great to stay connected with your friends. It's just knowing how to use them in the right manner. And
But are
so
we
it's
going to
great.
head?
Like,
We're going to head into a world where we're not going to have that much external control over it, though, right? In the sense that we're going
right.
to have like a smart contact lens. I
Yeah.
can't believe that hasn't happened yet. I know that it was, shown at
Mm-hmm.
CES several years ago. For some reason, it hasn't advanced.
Yeah.
But we keep saying we're going to take phones out of schools, we're going to take them out of bedrooms. But the
Mm.
reality is, at some point, you may have a contact lens, which becomes a little more tricky. Hopefully, people would
Yeah.
learn how to turn things on and off because that's the reality, right? We've always had
Yeah.
the ability to turn them on and off, and then you may end up with something with a chip in our brain.
Yeah.
Right. And at some point, we're going to have to navigate how we have that, where we have constant information flowing in. How will we decide again to gate that somehow, or to control the flow of it, or to decide
Mm.
we only want to see bits of it? So I think that these are hopefully habits that we are learning to practice now, because it's only going to get more and more invasive. Is my point around
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. No, no, for sure. And the technology is fantastic. It's the best time to live. I mean, an iPad in the classroom is great. Like it's like an iPad in the classroom. Like all the parents lament, there's an iPad in the classroom. Then I go to Africa. Oh, we're at a huge disadvantage because we don't have these iPads. And so the answer is in the middle. It's
Right.
yeah, the iPad's a great learning tool, but not all the time. So it's not 100% in the classroom. It's when it makes sense you use the iPad. Just like any new technology, artificial intelligence. If I can't figure out this math problem, I try it first on my own, then I take a picture of it and then it walks me through how to solve it. That is super helpful. And it's incredible how smart these kids are going to be because they have the answer at their fingertips after they try to deploy their own knowledge first. That's the key. Don't default to this stuff first. Try to write that novel yourself first and then use AI to help you.
So, okay, so I was just about to say, so AI in the classroom, how are you feeling about AI being designed to, like, so we talked about tablets. Yes, I agree. But AI being able to be, for me, a conduit to personalized learning, right? So each child will get what it is that they need and have
Mm-hmm.
it be very, very, again, I don't know what the word is, but yeah, I guess personalized. So that if I go faster in one thing or slow in another thing, I get either advanced or some additional support.
Yeah, I mean,
What
it's
age should
interesting.
that start?
Yeah. I mean, some of your listeners might not know this, but I teach a class on digital leadership at Northwestern University. And 18 months ago, basically AI is coming to the fore in terms of like general population. And immediately the university is like, can't use AI in the classroom. I'm like, oh boy, I don't know about that because all the
Right.
students want to learn it. And so here we fast forward, just taught the class 2 weeks ago. It's like 70% AI. So it could quickly change. But your initial reactions, fear, keep this stuff out. Part of the conversations 18 months ago were, well, let me use an analogy. I know some of you guys were here, some of you guys on this call were here when calculators came out. And that was a big problem because you're like, you can't have a calculator in a classroom. That's crazy. And then over time, you realize, wait, yeah, it's sometimes good to use a calculator in the classroom, sometimes not. And so a lot of the stuff that we wrestle with, history repeats itself because no one listens the first time. And so you've got to look back sometimes to figure out, oh, what was this 40 years ago and how did they to deal with it? And usually you can find an answer there. So AI in the classroom absolutely should be used. I mean, if you think about most people know what Duolingo is now. So Duolingo, if you want to learn a language, heavy AI, right? And it customizes it. What am I good at? What am I struggling with? In learning Spanish. Okay, now it's tailored to my needs to make me better at speaking Spanish. And so, in more and more classrooms, use Duolingo. If you're teaching Spanish, why wouldn't you? It's a fantastic tool. And so, that's where you need to get to sooner rather than later. The pushback's always, no one likes change. And so, the immediate reaction when you don't understand something is just to block it. But then it quickly becomes laughable several years later and you move forward. So, just remember the calculator example.
I love it. I think that is very true. Digital divide. You know, you talked about being in Africa or other parts of the country, it could be other parts of the United States. We saw that during COVID, right? The schools that had been
Mhm.
equipped with tablets ahead of time and had all not just the tablets, but also the ed techs that had walked
Mhm.
teachers and families through it and gone through
Yeah.
some of those rough moments of figuring out, you know, how to protect kids mostly on it versus the kids that hadn't. You know, there was one big high school in our city, not in our district, but in our city. It was rumored to
Mhm.
have had a whole closet full of iPads, but they hadn't deployed them because they didn't have the ed techs to support it. Right.
Oh,
And all of a
wow.
sudden
Yeah.
now COVID happens and they have to go figure it out. So
Yeah.
whether it's in the, you know, literally in our same city or whether it's across the world, right, there's going to be
Yep.
this really interesting awareness 10 years from now about those who had really, you know, access to the technology versus those who didn't. And I think it's going to be
Mhm.
pros and cons on both sides. Right.
Yeah.
So as you start to think about it for the families who can't afford it, will this be a leveler, right? I think that the fact is
Mhm.
it'll become cheaper and more accessible to everyone, the same way that phones have.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I'm more of an optimist. I think technology is a great equalizer. The one concern, especially as you step into the quantum era, just as the speed, is that if we have greater speed to make it like more of a simplified example, if we have greater speed on a tool like ChatGPT than someone in Africa that still has access, that's the great equalizer. Is it really if you can get access to the internet, which is becoming more and more pervasive,
Yeah.
then it's the great equalizer. The speed does concern me a little bit. Is that if one's at 5 times the speed, it's not 5 times the learning, but it gives you a big advantage if the answer comes back in 2 seconds versus if it comes back in 50 seconds.
Yeah, I think that, but I think that in some ways, what we're going to find is maybe the person with the 50 seconds there's a little bit more thoughtfulness than versus just getting it more and more. Like what I was
That's
saying is
true.
I think that actually we're going to find that in some ways being either slower or less, having it fully and making
Yeah.
your life might actually turn out to be an advantage. I think that when you look at it around the world, one of the big key things there is also having the local values be built into it, right? That we're not just
Yep.
exporting our LLMs everywhere around the world. And so I think what Switzerland is doing, which they've built their own, that has 1,000 languages that's used for the
Mm.
public good, is a really
Yep.
great example of how this technology can be built. So it's not just even about access, right? But it's also around sensitivity to cultural differences and values, norms, and all that kind of stuff around the world, so that we feel as though people all feel as though their cultures are represented in these tools that we're
Yeah.
all
No,
having
you're right. I
access to.
love what you said about if you have that 50-second lag, that it helps you avoid a pitfall that they've already quickly identified with artificial intelligence. And as a study done by MIT, that if you just start with the AI rather than you thinking it through, that it actually shuts off. It doesn't allow that part of your brain to develop. So they've already come up with some data that's pretty scary around that. So the key is you want to think first and
Right,
then use AI like a coworker
right,
to bounce ideas off of rather than to start with AI. Is think about it like a coworker. That's why artificial intelligence is a bad name. It should be co-intelligence.
right.
That it's really just bouncing your thoughts, your ideas, or you couldn't figure out the math problem, to go back to that. You go to the smartest kid in the class and ask him, "Hey, I'm struggling with this math problem. Do you mind helping me at lunch?" Treating it like that.
And so if you could design an app, because at this point, by the way, we could probably prompt our way or vibe code our way
Yeah.
to one, right? That pulled us closer together versus further apart using any of these
Hmm.
technologies. Could you imagine what that could look like? Or would that be, something your daughters would be curious about? I think that there's, again, how does this technology pull us closer instead of farther into our own ways of thinking?
Yeah, I've never thought about this. This is the random idea that just popped into my head. And so this is going to be free flow of thought.
Love it.
But it would be gamifying the system so that if let's just make it a little simpler, but if I'm texting my friend and after about 15 minutes, this alert comes up, your texting is cut off because you've been texting this person for 15 minutes. You have two choices. You can either call them or go meet with them in person. And then somehow there's points rewarded for that call or meeting in person. And so I think that would be fascinating in an app, the way that would work. And I think it'd be great for adults.
Right,
Like you've been texting this person for like a half hour.
right.
It'd be faster. Our data shows it's going to be faster for you to call them if they're out of state, or if they're in town, you should set up a meeting or go meet with them.
Well, what that app would do also, the byproduct of that is that I would be less likely to text in the middle of a meeting or in the middle of, someplace else where I couldn't make a call, because I would
Yeah.
get called out on that one at
Yeah, that's
times,
true.
because I don't think that I am nearly as focused as you would want me to be in some of those environments where I do think that I, can do the multitasking. It was interesting,
Yeah.
we did the exercise during your talk about trying to write things in two different ways, when where you're toggling back and forth between two streams of thinking and when we're not. And so we all like to think that we can navigate both at the same time.
Yeah.
That would
Mhm.
call me out on that, to be
Yeah.
fair. So
Yeah.
I'd have to be careful about how long I kept my text string going.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
definitely know that those strings are actually really important to people, right? That incentive to behavior, modification in one way or another. So I like the idea that it would encourage me to call. I like it.
Yeah, no, it's for good, right? Kind
Right.
of Duolingo's trying to use gamification for good, that you can learn a language. So it's around learning that they uses those tools. Whereas some of these tools like Snapchat and their streaks, they're using gamification, that dopamine hit, for nefarious reasons, like to keep you addicted so that I can make more money as a corporation. And so
Yes.
that's what I'd like to see. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Well, and I think, again, then what would be the business model and the incentive behind that, so that it's working for us versus against us? A friend of mine, Jerry Mikowski, very many years ago introduced this idea of serve versus stalk for these
Mm,
technologies. That, again, it's not about the tech; it's about whether or not it's designed to serve me and to
yeah.
make myself healthier and more connected and whatever the goals that I want, versus to stalk me for some sort of commercial gain for a very small number of people. And another friend who is literally thinking about redesigning the internet, like hasn't thinking about it, has actually been working on it to build a distributed web where the apps aren't in the center and the data centers aren't in the center. It would be literally peer to peer. And we did a
Hmm.
thought exercise at one point about what would you how can you imagine an internet that worked for me? Like, and we all were, imagining apps that would be designed that worked just for us in a way that
Yeah.
wasn't designed for the, the commercial purposes that other people wanted it
Yep.
to be for. It's a really liberating exercise to go do that, to imagine that again, it could be a really empowering, amazing tool that serves
Yeah.
us. And I would like
That'd
us
be
to keep
good.
moving in that direction. I know. Well, hopefully everything
Yeah.
that you say from the stage and I say from the stage, eventually we'll
Yeah.
get the next generation of builders and prompt engineers to start building things in that way. Because the good news is that will also be more and more distributed. I think it'll be outside of just the corporations, right? It'll be this ability for any of us to go build the thing that we want to go build. So if you look 10 years into the future and you think about the kids who had been exposed to this conversation around focus and around, what I don't know the word I was trying to say, but like having some diligence around when you do something, when you don't do something, really thoughtfulness,
Mhm.
right? Intention around that
Mhm.
versus the kids that you
Yeah.
didn't. What do you imagine the world's going to look like 10 years in advance between those two different kids?
My hope is it looks like one big vision board so that they understand the vision. What are they trying to do with their life? And so to help me out, this isn't anything new or revolutionary. It's just something. So the Focus project itself was a project I did for 2 years. Supposed to be a year, but Focus is really hard, so it took 2 years. And so there's a lot of false starts. But one thing, because people always ask me, like, what do you use? There's a lot of stuff in this book. What do you use on a daily level? And one of them is these vision boards. So I'll create it at the beginning of the year. I use mainly, I either hand draw it or clip art. If you're not a good artist, just grab some black and white clip art of what you want to do for
I think
that
in the old
year.
days we still cut it out by magazines and
Yeah,
just
still cut
like
it out. Still cut
that.
it out. But like I'm looking at my vision board right now, always the bigger the image, the more important it is. And so you've got this page, you're trying to vision, what am I going to do in the next 12 months? And so at the middle's of the family, right? I've got my two daughters. They don't look anything like them. I'm not that good of a drawer. Then we've got my wife, myself. So that's big. Then you got faith. You got family. And then I want to learn Spanish. So that's on there. I'm just glancing over here. Golf, I want to get a little better. So I might have a handicap, try to get my handicap lower. I want to write a new book. I've got that book there. You get the point. And then throughout the course of the year, I'm looking at that periodically. Sometimes it might be that week, sometimes it goes a couple weeks. But then I look at it and I color in how much progress I'm having on each one. So I always have that vision of like I need to color in a lot more. Now keep in mind I've never colored in the whole thing completely because like my mom always told me I want you to shoot like for that the big goal and hope and then I'd rather you shoot for the big goal and miss it than lower the goal and hit it.
Right.
And so it's never completely colored in, but I make sure the big ones are colored in. So that's the key. That allows me to focus. So if I go a couple of weeks where I've got distracted, I'm doing busy. So I'm doing throughput. So I'm rocking tons of emails. I'm doing all these texts. I feel like I'm working hard, but I'm not producing anything. I'm not getting to the output. I'm not going closer, stepping towards that vision or goal. So that's what helps me. These vision boards help me tremendously. And it's old school, right? It's a piece of paper with these images that I'm coloring in.
Well,
And
I was
so
just thinking that we
my
were talking about apps. That would actually be a really interesting
yeah.
app, right? Is to design that
Oh,
digital vision board,
yeah.
and then to your point, have partly that you're filling it in, but partly also that it would. I mean, I'm just being like totally like
Yeah,
wacky
yeah.
right now, but it would see how
Yeah.
I'm spending my time, right? It would see if you went to play golf, because it would be in your
Right.
calendar or not. It would see whether or not you spent time talking to these various people that were really important to you or not, and it would actually help like color that in. It would almost be a reflection of how you're
Yeah.
really spending the time, as opposed to you, you know, self-reporting. That would actually be
No,
really
that'd be
interesting.
good. That'd be good. And sometimes, I mean, obviously, if you put that picture and made it digital, it could, like, I have a goal. I want to read 42 books this year. And so it could pull in from Goodreads because I'll write a
Yeah.
review. Now that there's AI, it's a lot easier to write a review, but I'll write a review about a book, but it could pull that in. So I don't even have to color it in if I didn't want to. It's tracking it
Yeah, it'd
for
just be
me.
interesting. I mean, I think there's something very satisfying, surely, about coloring it in. But just as
Yeah.
you're talking about it, it just would be interesting to have back to your point about focus, right? The idea is that you make really clear what the priorities are in your life, and then it helps
Yeah.
you nudge you along the way to help you figure out if you're making the progress against those
Yeah.
things or not. I think you talked a lot about from the stage, right? About being really clear on the goal and being flexible about the path that gets you
Mhm.
to the goal.
Yep. You got to be firm in your destination, but flexible in the path. Because it used to be you could set goal and then you have a linear progression towards said goal. That's impossible just because the world's changing too quick. There's going to be hurdles put in your place. So it's really about being firm in your destination and flexible in your path on how you get to that destination.
Is there one example that you can give that would be maybe parenting related around
Oh,
that?
parenting related. That's a good question. Let's see. Parenting. I guess this might be relatable. Is so to focus, one of the biggest keys to focus is being able to say no to almost everything that allows you to say yes to the big things. And so, one of when you look at that, so my firm destination is I want to get better at saying no.
Oh,
I like you and a lot of listeners, we're people pleasers. That serves us well most of the time. But if you say yes to everybody, you're really saying no to everyone because you're not gonna be able to do a good job if you're saying yes to everybody. So you're really saying no, and so you're gonna drop the ball on something if you say yes to everybody. So that allows me, at least in my mind, okay, that gives me pause. Like, okay, I'm actually doing them a favor when I say no. And so you have to have a system in place in order for you to get to that firm destination. So there's going to
right.
be hurdles that come up. You're going to say yes when you don't want to, but over time you get better at this. So I think a lot of you will be able to relate to this. So I set up when I was writing the project, I go, wait, I've got to test this. And so I volunteer my time to teach at our church, Sunday school. And then invariably, I have two daughters, so I want to teach with them because it's more time with them. And I travel quite a bit because what I do is speaking on stage. But is invariably they needed volunteers to handle the boys because this is when the girls were a little younger. The younger boys are a little harder, more rambunctious, a little more energy. So they have a tougher time getting volunteers. So invariably, I'd get a call midweek. Hey, I know you signed up for the girls. Can you handle the boys? And so I didn't want to, but I'd be like, what kind of volunteer am I? It's just on my terms. And so I go, okay, I'll do it. And then I'm doing this project. I get an email. Hey, can you do the boys? And I reply back, hey, I'd love to, but I don't have a lot of time with my girls because I'm traveling. I want to spend as much time with them. So I'd really prefer to do the girls. Thank you very much. And felt terrible, but sent it back. I'm like, oh, I can't believe I did that. If I wasn't writing this book, I wouldn't have been able to do that. But man, that felt good. I'm like, now I get to spend time with my girls this weekend. And then about 48 hours, I get an email back. I know you said no, but we're really in a tight spot. I'm like, can you take the boys? And I go, oh my gosh, I'm about to cave like I normally would. And I go, nope, I got to test this stuff out. I got to have a system in place. So I copy and paste the exact same email I sent, modified maybe 1% of it, and sent it back. And then I got to teach my girls. It was great. And it's the person they found a woman to switch in to do the boys. And it's not always going to be rainbows and unicorns like this, but it turns out she actually enjoyed working with the boys better. So it was a win-win. But the moral of that story is I had to put a system in place.
Yeah.
And now I use that system all the time. A lot of times it's like, hey, I'm heads down on a book. This sounds like a great opportunity for somebody else. And before I might write, circle back with me in a couple weeks. Maybe we can do, I'm busy right now. I might be able to do it in
Right.
a couple
Right.
weeks. Don't do that. Like it's not going to get any better. You're not going to want to do it later. So the other system I have in place is if it's not a heck yes, it should be a heck no. So if someone comes up to you, they go, hey, I've got 2 tickets to the US Open. Heck yes, I'm in. Like, I'll take those. If they come up to you and say, hey, there's this networking thing, it'd probably be good. You're like, I should probably go to that. It's in a couple weeks. It's not going to get any better. So that should be a heck no. So if it's not a heck yes, it should be a heck no. You've got to understand you only have so many yeses, especially when you think about parenting, is that every yes that's not related to your family is going to take time from your family. So it
Right.
certainly, absolutely must be a heck yes. And we have this, our brain's weird in the sense that it always thinks we have more time in the future, which
Yeah.
we don't.
I know. I'm
And
super
so,
guilty of that. Yes.
yeah. So get a system in place to not only say no, but make it a quick no. And when you think about, once I interviewed a bunch of people, whether it's sales or whether it's just someone needs you to volunteer somewhere, it's a quick no is much better than a long maybe or a long no, because that person's hanging on thinking maybe you can be the volunteer that works at that bake sale that weekend.
Right.
Where if you're like, I can't do it, sorry, it's just quick and they can move on to the next person. Same in sales too. If you ever sit on a sales pipeline, the worst prospect is someone's just like, yeah, we're making a decision. We should know in a couple days. A couple days go by. "Oh, I should know in a couple more days."
Right.
And then they eventually say no. You're like, I could have gone and use this time somewhere else, like as a salesperson. So
Right.
it's good in both parenting and also in business to get a system in place to say no. If it's not a heck yes, it should be a heck no. And a quick no is always better for that person than a long maybe or definitely a long no.
Well, I'm just going to say selfishly, I'm super glad you said heck yes to joining me for this conversation.
Fuzzy easy
Because
is a heck yes.
I know, again, well, we've talked about it for years, but we never quite pulled it off. And so I'm
No.
super, super grateful that you did this. And I do think like helping people, sort of my takeaways from this again, that if 80% of your time is spent with your children under 18, which I think is true. Again, my children are older. It's not quite that percentage, but I definitely think it's a high percentage. And so everything that you say yes to that takes you away from your children takes you away from that percentage, right?
Yeah.
Or not
Yep.
using that percentage well. And we were just, on another conversation talking about how much pressure parents feel right now to try and keep up with the outside world, with the technology demands and the business demands and the uncertainty that exists. And so that time becomes even more and more precious for us to be able to focus on. I love the idea
Yeah.
of the vision board and being able
Yeah.
to create one that you do every year. Do you do it with your family? Do you guys have a joint family vision board?
I have them for the girls. We do it with the girls. Yeah, it's great.
So they have one each for themselves.
They have one each for themselves. Yeah.
Because I think it might be
That's
actually
good.
interesting. My partner and I wanted to do something like that with him for our relationship. What are we focused on as a
Yeah.
team for the year
Yeah.
right now? So I think that I'm going to
Yeah.
try and bring that back. We haven't officially done it yet, but I really want to do it because I think that, to your point, even if you're not coloring it in, if it's just in your awareness, you're going to
Yeah.
be more focused on it. Period.
Yep.
Right, and you'll have
Yes.
declared it as a priority that deserves your time and attention. So,
Exactly.
and then the last is to have systems in place. So whether that's your charging your phones in downstairs, or whether you've got the template email that makes it easier to say no, or whatever else. Any other suggestions? Any one or two you think that we've left out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like you mentioned something in your prior conversation, this came into my head is that so we were fortunate. We were thinking about pulling the girls for school for 8 months to go around the world when they're in sixth and seventh grade. It's like sixth and a half grade and seventh and a half grade. We thought was the ideal time. And then the world's happening and then everything occurs. And the girls really didn't want to go on a 8 month thing. So we wound up just going 6 weeks to Europe, which is great. But the reason I'm telling that story is because you, as a parent, sometimes you think you have to come up with these grandiose things that you have to do this while you're there. And it's like, we're going to XYZ. But one of the best memories all of us have was it was terrible weather in Belgium. And we wound up just having to be hunkered down in the hotel. And we're just making Taylor Swift bracelets together. And so it's those little things that those are the moments that matter.
Right.
And so don't, like you mentioned, it's not about keeping up with the Joneses, whether that's technology related or not.
Right.
It's just trying to find those it's time,
I
right?
think I
Just
focus on the
yeah,
moment, right? And the gift
yeah,
of that moment. I was just telling
yeah,
someone the other day, I remember one of my fondest memories when we went back to Germany to see our family was being in this tiny little Airbnb, making whatever random dinner we were making there from
yeah,
the ingredients that we had, and watching Herbie the Love Bug dubbed in German
yeah,
and making and laughing the whole time. I remember actually
yeah,
that more than I remember some of the sites that we saw or some of the other things that we went and did. And I will, just since you put the T Swift mentioned there, I did listen to your podcast with her last night, going,
oh
oh my God, I'm
nice,
technically 1 degree of separation
there
from
we go,
Taylor now because of
yeah,
your
just
conversation
getting
with her.
married.
So I recommend anyone goes and checks out your
Yeah,
podcast. You can hear a little bit of Taylor and her very articulate answers to your
yeah,
thoughtful questions. But thank you so much for your time, Erik. I really appreciate it. I know that you are, again, busy flying around and that these hours all count. So thank you for helping us help parents feel a little less overwhelmed by the world and are able to keep their calm and their focus on the stuff that matters most.
yeah, I love what you're doing. This is super helpful for everyone, and we're all in this together. No one has the perfect answer for everything, so it's
Exactly.
always about that progress versus perfection. Do the best you can. Do the best and forget the rest, as they say.
There you go. Awesome. Thank you so much, my friend. Safe travels, and I'll see you around town soon.
Yeah, it sounds good. Thank you so much.